when you're high in shadow intelligence, not only are you free to like live your life, launch your business, but you're free to enjoy it without getting paralyzed by shame and insecurity and I will be found out. Once you're high in shadow intelligence, life gets really fun. When people say this is just who I am, that is actually like physiologically inaccurate because who you are now is subject to change without notice at any moment of any day.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of Next Level University. We have a very, very, very special guest today. She is a therapist, teacher, speaker, and a trauma specialist who is committed to dismantling the mental health myths that keep us feeling stuck and sick. And she also has a book coming out, The Science of Stuck, March 15th. Britt Frank, what is going on, Britt?
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Likewise. Thank you for joining us. We had a very wonderful preamble. Any opportunity we get to team up on Alan is a great experience for me overall. So when it comes to trauma, this is a question that we've had a bunch of different people in your field on, and I always like to ask a question similar to this. You talk about getting over what happened versus metabolizing what happened. Can you walk us through the deeper understanding of when somebody's talking about trauma, what is the ultimate results that they're looking for when they're reflecting or when they're healing through that?
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to flip that.
Please.
I talk about metabolizing trauma, not getting over it.
Yes.
Yes. Because if we could get over it, we would.
Yes.
I work with a lot of people with very good minds, a lot of people with very good thinking skills, very good brains. If we could if we could think our way and get over what happens to us, we'd all be good to go and I wouldn't have a job. So I like to explain it. We really need to think of it more in terms of physiology, like food, right? You don't get over the poisoned salmon that you ate. You have to metabolize it and sometimes you have to puke it up. And so our life experiences are very much the same. We can't think our way forward and we can't get over things. We need to physiologically metabolize our life experiences just like we do our food.
I had a breath work. I used to do breath work often, like probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, Kev. We had someone named Samantha Skelly come on the show and we did a breath work exercise actually live with an audience. And 22 out of the 24 people were crying. And it was wild. And I did breath work for quite a lot after that. And I just always found myself crying. And it was super, super healing. And I'm wondering now why I don't do it anymore. But is that me metabolizing my trauma? I guess, is that just one technique? Like, how does someone metabolize their trauma?
That's such a great question. And with breath work, it's so tricky. So my disclaimer here is I love breath work. I love breath workers. I love the modality. And like any medicine or any healing approach, for some people, in some cases, in some instances, it's fabulous. And in some people, in some instances, it's absolutely horrendous. I am one of the people for whom breath work has the opposite effects. Doing breath work, forcing breath into my system makes me feel like I'm being attacked. And so again, no disrespect to breath workers. It is incredible the healing that can happen when you're with a skilled breathwork facilitator, and I'm all about it. So for you, it might very well be that your crying was a example of you metabolizing your trauma. Mm-hmm. For me, my breath work was an example of me re-experiencing my trauma. So it's so dicey and so nuanced to really know, oh, they're crying, therefore they're metabolizing, versus they could be metabolizing their trauma when you have a reaction. You could be re-experiencing your trauma when you have a reaction, or you could be having some sort of big cathartic release and then you feel amazing. And then the next day you feel like crap again. So it's very, very nuanced, which is what we were talking about in the preamble. Like if only it were so simple, like do your 4-7-9 breathing and then you're good. It's if only it were that simple.
That's what I was hoping. I'm just joking. I do think it was very healing for me. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily know why. But when you mentioned a physiological metabolizing, it made me think of that. So that must have been what my subconscious picked up on there.
Well, what I loved about what you were sharing was that you were having an experience, and it sounds like, everyone doing that was having an experience of their body.
Mhm.
Breath work requires you to dial down from your brain and your mind into your lungs and into your chest and into your diaphragm. And so you're right, metabolizing trauma requires us to be inside our body. Breath work is one on road to that. It's not the only one, it's one of many. But anywhere you're being mindful of the fact that you live in a body, we have a great chance at actually getting access to healing things.
Mm.
Britt, do you think, and again, I love that we can go deeper and be more nuanced, when somebody is on the healing journey, what can they expect? Not what should they expect, but Alan and I have done so much healing over the 870 episodes of this and being entrepreneurs and relationships and all of that stuff. It's been very painful, and it's been very mirrored times where I'm looking at myself and saying, oh, I can't believe that's me. How would you describe the expectations that somebody can have for their own version of healing? And again, no blanket statements, obviously, everything's going to be different, but what would you say to that?
I can actually make a blanket statement to that.
Yes.
There are very few times where I can say, this is how it is. To that question, what can someone expect if they're going on a healing journey? Two things are guaranteed. It's going to really, really suck, and it's going to be absolutely worth it.
Ah, that was cool.
That was. I appreciate that.
That's what I say about starting a business.
Yes, that's valid.
Right.
That's valid.
Yeah.
We've had. There's a lot of people out there that say, like, even going to the business part, yeah, it should be easy. It should be awesome. It should be aligned. Sure, I support that, but it's not. So how do we help people realize that it will be worth it?
So, and I'm a business owner too. So I get this sucks and it's what I'm supposed to do. And I love it and I hate it. And often launching a business can feel like an abusive relationship. And it's very similar if you're going high, and I've been in both. It's very high level. It's like, what am I doing? And why am I doing this to myself? How can you tell somebody it's going to be worth it? I would not have believed you for all of the money in the world that this path would have been worth it. I had people that I trusted that were living their, worth it stage of the journey. And I just had to summon up whatever grit was in there to trust very, very without any sights that if I just hung on long enough, that there's a knowing for, I think, anybody that either starts a business or goes on a healing path. There's a deep inner knowing that there is something more than what I'm seeing, what I'm living, what I'm experiencing. But it's really kind of like a blind faith kind of thing. Like, just grit your teeth and hang on. It will be worth it. And you don't have to believe me. There's enough people that can look back and say, yep, it is. Hang in there.
Yeah.
Oh, so true. You wrote this on your Instagram. It says the opposite of trauma is choice. Absolutely love that. Can you go deeper?
I can. Thank you for asking. So the opposite of trauma is choice is my little pithy Instagrammable thing. Really, trauma can be defined by the complete absence of choice. Because let's be honest, if we actually had a choice, we would have all chosen to not be traumatized. And even when we're making the best choices available and it's like, well, I chose this. It's like, yeah, but not really. If we're given all of the options freely and all of the resources in the world, nobody chooses to be traumatized. So anywhere there is the absence of choice, there is likely to be the presence of trauma. Now, if you take that principle that trauma is the absence of choice, well, that must mean that anywhere we are making choices, we are counteracting trauma. So making a choice is a very powerful healing antidote to a traumatized nervous system. Any choice. When I work with people who are like fresh into drug rehab, like 2 days after a PCP psychosis, there's no high level thinking to be done. It's like, okay, what do you want to wear today? What side of your pants are you going to stick your leg into first? Anywhere we are mindful of a choice, no matter how tiny, we begin the healing process of healing trauma.
Do you think that oftentimes trauma is correlated to people making, or let me ask you this. Do you think that there is a correlation between trauma and someone not making empowering choices?
Oh, I could have so much fun with that one. So I would say empowering choices requires freedom, access, and a multitude of information and support, right? It's so I was an addict. You could say that I wasn't making very empowering choices by, doing a bunch of coke or smoking a bunch of meth or whatever I was into. So did they look empowering? Well, no, but the goal of my addiction was to protect me from a very painful truth. So in that sense, my addiction was quite empowering because it worked. I was able to stay in denial for like 20 years. It was quite effective. So I think we'd have to first define empowering and then define choice. But no, I don't think trauma is a lack of empowerment. I think it's the lack of available options, resources, and information.
Do you
I
mind
have a
if
quote.
Keep going?
I have a quote
Okay.
that I'd like to ask about.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to try not to butcher this one because I butchered the last one a little bit. So, it basically, in a nutshell, dysfunctional family is not a category, but a continuum on which every family falls.
Yes.
I think Alan and I have come, and I love my family, Alan loves his family, but we've seen so many family dynamics, for lack of better phrasing, and we've seen the result of how that person is now living their life. And a lot of that probably is because of the way they were raised. Can you go into, again, there's no normal, but can you go into how do you navigate the traumas of family, even going back to choices? A lot of us don't feel like we have a choice when it comes to family. What advice, what tactics are there for people who a lot of their trauma stems from their family and they have to continue seeing them and they don't know how to navigate that?
Sure. And I so appreciate that. And when I say that a dysfunctional family is a continuum, because there are no perfect humans, all people are imperfect and all families are made of people. Like, therefore, logically, one could surmise there's no such thing as a perfect family. Therefore, we're all dysfunctional. So I will argue that with anyone that wants to say otherwise. Now, there are degrees of, dysfunction and skillfulness. Most people think if they don't have an abusive, completely jacked up childhood, that they don't qualify to consider themselves as traumatized or to consider that they came from some dysfunction. So what I like to use for those people is forget about dysfunctional and toxic and abusive. Let's just talk about skillful versus unskillful. You may love your mother dearly. She may have had the best of intentions and been like the most wonderful human on the planet. But if she was missing some skills, you're going to end up with some trauma, and that's not her fault. So I encourage people who are really wrestling with this. What do I do about my family? Like, trauma is not about blaming your parents. It's about assessing impact of their choices. And regardless of what they meant to do or how hard they tried or how much they loved you, how is your life working? How is your decision-making capacity? Do you freeze under conflict? Do you feel paralyzed by indecision? Do you have trouble knowing what you like and what you don't like and how to relax and how to enjoy food and your body and sex and all of these wonderful things? So I tell people, don't get hung up on blaming your family. Get hung up on observing the impact of your life on your body and on your mind. If we start with impact and we forget about intention, we can stay in the zone of healing.
Interesting. I think it's important to understand that having pure intentions and then having an actual capability from the frame you just said of skills. So, for example, Emilia and I, we intend to be magnificent, conscious parents. Eventually, not yet. And we're going to, and quite frankly, I know that we will be far more skillful, conscious parents than what we had. But one of the reasons why is because of Google. And because of this podcast, and because of the resources, and our educations were better, and if you see all my degrees, right? No, but, and if it wasn't for my mom providing and helping me learn what her parents didn't teach her, right? So we're on this continuum of evolution.
Hi there, this is Dr. Taryn McCarthy, and I am the host of the Business of Happiness podcast, which would not be in existence were it not for the one and only incredible Kevin Palmieri. Seriously, I am so indebted to Kevin for the service that he provides. Every week he meets with me. He has been coaching me on how to initiate and launch this podcast. He helped me put it together with his great expertise, and every week his whole team works tirelessly to get these podcasts uploaded to Buzzsprout and to deliver my content to my audience. I am so grateful. I couldn't say enough about him. In fact, we've been working together so well. I've seen so much wonderful input from my listeners and asking me for more that in just a few weeks we're going to be doubling the number of podcasts we produce per week. So this trajectory is just flying and I'm really enjoying the whole process. So I couldn't say enough about him. Please, if this is something you're considering, I highly recommend him. And reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about our experience. Good luck. Bye-bye.
But you mentioned that it's not her fault, meaning like a mother that was unskilled had the best intentions. It wasn't her fault that she did a poor job. Fault versus responsibility. How do we, whether this is my mom or Kevin's family or your family, like how do you personally reconcile this? There's a lot of things my mother, I think, did wonderful. There's some things that she definitely did not. Where is this responsibility piece? When you mentioned it's not her fault, I think some of it is, honestly. But I also tend to think that everything is my fault because I always have a choice in everything that I do. And so I take a ton of responsibility, sometimes probably too much, and I think other people sometimes are the opposite. What's your take on fault and responsibility in this whole realm of trauma and parenting?
I love that question so much, especially because you are the first to say, yeah, there's some blame there and there's some fault there. And, you know, you are going to be an amazing parent and you're still going to mess up your kids because you're still a human. And so, you know, the best way, and this is what I say to all parents, I don't have children, but I got trained as a play therapist very early on. So I don't speak the language of parenting, but I'm fluent in the language of child. Like all kids need is a witness. It doesn't matter whether or not you mess up, as long as you're aware that you're messing up and then you help redirect the mess ups when they happen, your kids are going to be okay. Like the bar is incredibly low for like children just need like one person to witness them when they're struggling and offer up support and then we're good to go. So that's that. But your kid is going to be very lucky to have a conscious parent. Parents.
I appreciate that.
That said.
And like you said, I will screw up.
Yes.
But far less than I think most people do. And I think that's the interesting thing. Even in life, I screw up every single day. I just think I screw up less than I used to.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'll go with I screw up differently than I used to with a lot less consequential impact on my life. But let's talk again in, you know, when your kids are like 10 and we'll see how that went.
Perfect. Sounds good.
So fault versus responsibility, you know, it's important to have your story validated, you know, because I have everything in my personal story from unintended impact to overt abuse and everything in between. We can really get lost in the weeds if we're stuck on who's to blame and whose fault and who knew what. That's an important trailhead to go down, but it's not the first one and it's not the fifth one and it's not the ninth one. Before we even get into this sort of, you know, perpendicular relating to the people in our life and assigning intention and going into motivation, let's just start with, like, if you were my client, I'd be like, okay, how are you? Forget about what's going on out there. Let's talk about you. Let's get you shored up. Let's get you back in touch with the parts of you that you've been disconnected from. Let's get you back in your body. Once you are more integrated and more holistically present in your life, the question of fault versus responsibility versus blame sort of becomes a lot more clear and a lot easier to navigate.
Fire.
Britt, how do you separate trauma and identity? I was always the kid that didn't have a dad. That was my identity. And now it is a wonderful handled chip on my shoulder that allows me to do things that I don't think a lot of other people are willing to do. And that's great. But for the first 25 years of my life, it was pretty brutal, honestly. How do you separate this happened to me and this is who I am as a human?
And I appreciate you sharing that because it's important. And I get a lot of pushback from people because I'm so anti-permanent diagnosis. You know, like I've had clinical depression and panic disorder and borderline personality disorder and complex like all of the things. And for me, I wore my diagnoses like a blanket. It's okay. This is my identity. It's who I am. Now I have access to like-minded people who love and support me. Now I can tuck myself away under these rituals and customs. And as long as I have this diagnosis as my identity, I'm safe, I'm accepted, and I'm loved. So for me, the prospect of healing was really terrifying because if I'm no longer leading with my my issues, then who am I aside from my depression? Who am I without my panic? Like, if I'm not borderline personality disordered, then like, who the hell am I in the world? So I love that what you said, that trauma isn't an identity. And we know because of neuroplasticity, the brains that we live in now are not the brains we will live in later. So when people say, and this is another one of my quotes on Instagram, when people say this is just who I am, that is actually like physiologically inaccurate, because who you are now is subject to change without notice at any moment of any day. So I encourage people, there's a time for leaning into trauma as your identity. It's important if you've been alone in your trauma to have access to supportive people, but know that it doesn't have to be your identity. And there's so much more to be had than staying put in this is my identity as a survivor, which I honor and validate. And I am a survivor of lots of things, but not having to lead with that is empowering. I can still share it. I am empowered by sharing my story. Hey, I survived domestic violence and this is what it was like for me. And I can talk to other people going through it, but it's not this is who I am. It's this is what I experienced versus the core, the isness of me, if we're going to go like super deep.
Love. So, I have the question here that I wanted to ask. This is my favorite question to ask anyone who I do believe is an expert in a specific area, which I'm genuinely realizing more and more. I no longer believe that about most people. As we learn a lot, it's kind of like very clear to pull out the pretenders versus the actual people with real expertise. So I consider you, and you consider yourself, this is in your brand, a trauma therapist, and you're certified, all those things. Awesome. What's one thing that only a trauma therapist would know? I've been studying the human condition my entire existence, and I will never stop. Quite frankly, never. Universe, myself, the world, business, economy, politics, government, it's never going to stop. I need to know what you know that I would never know unless I was a trauma therapist in the trenches of trauma therapy. Talk to me.
Oh, I like that. Okay. So I don't know if trauma therapists have the market cornered on this particular insight. There's lots of healing practitioners who don't have licenses in the therapeutic modalities who know this. But I think anybody that's trained in trauma, I want to blank this. Anybody that's trained in trauma as a physiological process in our bodies would know that you have everything inside you that you need to heal. Like, help is not coming, or I shouldn't say help. Rescue is not coming from outside of you. We all need people. We all need resources. We all need information. We all need tools and hacks and tricks and tactics and all of that. But anybody trained in trauma will tell you every single thing that you need to actualize, to live your best life, to do your thing, assuming you have a safe environment and access to resources and all of that, you have embedded within you. The problem that most of us have when it comes to actualizing isn't an inherent flaw or an inherent dysfunction. It's things like privilege or oppression or lack of access to resources. And that is not the same thing as, well, you're just crazy, you're just broken. There's a trauma-informed person will know there is absolutely nothing wrong with you, that every single one of your pathologies or symptoms or dysfunctions comes from a self-preservation intention. And that's actually, it doesn't mean that we co-sign on all the behaviors, but knowing that the intention of every pathological behavior is survival and self-preservation is really cool, which means there's no such thing as self-sabotage. There's no such thing as a lazy person. There's no such thing as unmotivated. We can be motivated by comfort and safety and being small, but there's no such thing as unmotivated. It's just, what direction are you motivated in? So anybody trained in trauma will tell you that.
That must
really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that must help you be more empathetic, or maybe less judgmental, because you're not judging a behavior, you're understanding at the depths of what is causing that, which is very, very interesting.
Well, I mean, I smoked meth. I'm not one to judge. Like, I've done enough crap and seen enough, like, I've made enough bad choices that I'm not here to judge. But judging behavior doesn't change behavior. Getting curious about the functionality of behavior does change. So it does allow me not to sit and because it's like, wow, that person's brain is so creative and how they destroyed everything in an effort to survive. Let's change it. but let's honor the intention behind the dysfunction. And I'm not co-signing on abuse or just, they're just abusing people because they're trying to survive. Like, not saying that. But if we're talking about inherently in every person is a functionality and a design that is, once we know the design, it's amazing what we can do.
Well, and it's clear that you are unreasonably passionate about it, which I absolutely love. And you said that in the beginning. Of anybody who wants me to talk about this, I go off. So I'm very much enjoying this. Alan, I know you have another question, but we're going to do a quick question, and then we got to let Britt go because we're going to go over here if we don't. Okay, there's intelligence. So there's IQ, EQ. Now I know that you have coined SQ, shadow intelligence. What is shadow intelligence, and how does somebody up-level theirs?
Oh, that's my favorite of all the things that I write about. Shadow intelligence is like my favorite thing. So, okay, in nature, shadows are created when light is blocked. So if the sun is blocked, there'll be a shadow. In the psyche, psychological shadows are created when our awareness is blocked. So anywhere our consciousness is blocked, there's going to be a shadow, a shadow quality or a shadow thought or whatever. Okay, so shadow intelligence is the degree to which we can be honest with ourselves about ourselves. You can be very high in IQ and EQ and have absolutely no sense of what are your shadows. What are those little places in your psyche, in your mind that if anybody knew you were thinking would like flip out? Like you were talking about how you're like, oh my God, this is me. It's like, can you be honest with yourself about yourself when you're high in shadow intelligence? Not only are you free to like live your life, launch your business, but you're free to enjoy it without getting paralyzed by shame and insecurity and I will be found out. Once you're high in shadow intelligence, life gets really fun.
The I will be found out thing. So many people, I think, are so afraid to be seen. I know that I was early in my life, and it's just so fascinating. We have this new Evolve score, and candor. Candor is one of the C's in the Evolve score. My girlfriend came up with it, and I have it written on my whiteboard: courage and candor. And I think I'm very candid with myself, at least in the last 7 years. But I have trouble being candid with other people regarding difficult, uncomfortable truths that maybe they're not aware of. And I think one of the reasons might be because they have psychological processes that you've mentioned that like block them from seeing the truth. Like, okay, so that's my question. How do we help people be more honest with themselves, but more importantly, teach them that that's like going to help you so much? I know it's going to be uncomfortable at first, for sure. No one wants to look in the mirror and go, wow, I'm like really out of shape. But that's like the first step to getting in shape. So how do you help people with that?
I don't. And you can't, and nobody can. What we can do is model it and live it. I didn't just inherently, someone never taught me, hey, Britt, if you're honest about your crap, your life will get better. I'm like, no, I don't believe that. But I watched enough people do it. And since we're little children, we learn by things being modeled for us. If I see somebody saying some really horrible truths about themselves in a safe, contained, boundaried way in the right environment with the right people and their lives are taking on, in the 12 steps, they say, if you see someone and you want what they have, ask them what they did. So I'm a really big advocate of, you don't really need to teach anyone. It's, lead by doing and attraction, not promotion. And if people want what you have, they'll come asking.
Powerful.
Fire. Britt, I feel like this has gone by in all of 5 minutes. I feel like we literally just started. Okay, where can people find out more about you? You have a book coming out on March 15th, The Science of Stuck. Talk about yourself, Britt.
Yes, thank you. Super excited about the book. You can order the book wherever. The website for the book is scienceofstuck.com. I'm most active on my Instagram, which is just my name, @BrittFrank. And Britt is not short for Brittany. It's just Britt. And so come find me, come say hello. I love meeting all the people that are on this journey. It's so fun.
We will link all of the stuff below, website, book, Instagram, all that happy jazz, so you can follow up with Britt, and awesome content on social media for sure.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Britt, thank you so much for joining us. This was wonderful. And for anyone viewing or listening this, we hope this helps you get to the next level.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.